First off, logistics. They'll be serving lunch. We have a hard stop at 2 o'clock because people have events to go to and also because this room is taken. There are bathrooms outside. There appear to be 2 for women and 1 for men, suggesting that Trump's executive orders have not all gone into effect. Feel free to use them at any point. We're going to have, I hope, a very lively discussion, but also, ultimately, I hope, a very productive one. The goal of this conversation and of this panel is to identify the dynamics between the media industry and the AI industry, identify where the leverage is, how the leverage could change, and then most importantly, the very specific goal we have is to leave this room with new ideas for business models, relationships that work for everybody, that work for the AI companies and work for the media industry, so the people who create the content on the web that we listen to, that we read, that we watch, can still have viable business models in the age of AI. All right, so that's the goal for today. I'm going to try to keep everybody on track. Bill Gross, you guys all know him. He's invented all kinds of... Bill, in fact, is so good at math that he was precisely able to invite the exact number of people to fill all the chairs and not oversubscribe. Bill has invented about 1,000 companies, and he's now the head of ProRata. Frank, the chairman and CEO of Central Europe of the Universal Music Group, has had a lot of experience in this issue, as you may understand. Next to him, we have Rich Caccappolo. He is the vice chairman of DMG, also a wonderful, wonderful person with lots of smart thoughts on this. Anastasia Nyrkovskaya, the CEO of Fortune. Wow, getting some fandom out in the audience. David Rhodes, one of my old bosses, the executive chairman of Sky News. We have a great group. Let's get going. First thing we're going to do is Bill is going to show us some slides, set the context, and off we go.
Great, well thank you all so much for coming. I'm really, really glad to share this with you. My whole mission in life right now is to make AI fair to human creativity. And I think there are a lot of ways we can come up with even today to make that happen. I have a few very quick slides to share with you. How do we make the future of AI search positive for all of human creativity? And I have a few stats to share with you that are really shocking to me when I looked at all of these. If you look at the evolution of search, back from 1990 to 2000, it was kind of the stone age of search with Yahoo, Excite, AltaVista, Lycos, and there was a lot of noise in the search results. And then the Google link strength algorithm came along, and the go-to pay-per-click model came along, and that really, really improved search. And we've had a 20-year run of that search really dominating. And those type of search results had links that were like breadcrumbs to the actual answer you were looking for. And now with AI search, sort of starting in 2022 and going forward, you ask a question and you get an answer. So it really is a new paradigm. There was nothing to challenge the Google model for 2 decades until this comes along. So there really is a disruptive moment, and that's why it's so important for creators to factor into that. And then I learned this from Matthew, the CEO of Cloudflare, just the other day. This was astonishing to me. 10 years ago, Google would crawl your site 2 times for every visitor they sent you. It was a 2-to-1 value exchange where they crawled your site twice and they sent you a visitor. Today, 10 years later, that's 6-to-1. So they're sending less visitors now to your site, a lot more people clicking on paid links, people clicking, not clicking because of the summary results at the top. So now it's 3 times harder to make your business work with Google traffic than it was 10 years ago. But ChatGPT is 250-to-1. They crawl your site 250 times for every visitor they send you, which is just astonishingly unfair value exchange. And then he told me this one didn't even fit on the chart. Anthropic, 250,000-to-1. They crawl 250,000 times for every visitor they send you. And the reason why it's 250,000-to-1, because it's basically 0, is that very rarely do they even credit you in any form, and you have no idea to actually go to the site at all because they just give you the answer directly. So that's why I think there's such a big problem. And of course, this AI thing is not going away. Some people think it's overhyped, some people think it's underhyped, but the investment is extreme. I shared this slide at the DLD conference just a few days ago. The amount of investment in AI is $1 billion per day in 2024, $1 billion per day. And it went from 1% of global R&D in 2020 to 20% of all R&D dollars last year. So 20% of every R&D dollar spent in every company was on AI. And we're advancing pretty fast. Right now, with ChatGPT, it has a 126 layer neural network. That's not the exact way to compare it to a rat brain, but a rat brain is about the same as that. But we're heading to 1,000 layers and more in this decade probably, and that is getting close to human or many humans working together. So it really, really is powerful. A 5-layer neural network in a fruit fly is very simple, and that's what we had 50 years ago when AI started. But now we're up to 126 layers with all the exponential growth and power of that. This tweet sums up where I think we are in the industry. I'll read it. I've been told to stop stealing muffins from the bakery. Unfortunately, it's the only way to keep my lucrative muffin stand in business. Everyone is fine with this. And that is really a good analogy to what I think is happening today. It even goes on to say, many large investors are interested in my muffin stand because I promised them the magic of muffins without costly ovens or workers. And this, you see, is why I must keep stealing the muffins. And that's pretty much what these guys say. Mustafa says, everything on the internet can be used for free. And Sam says, we need the copyrighted information to make our business model work. And it's just really unbelievable that they actually say those things out loud. I mean, they're doing that in the background, but they actually say those things out loud. So in all other forms of media, revenue is shared with the creators. In Spotify is a great example, YouTube is a great example, Apple Music, all of these obviously share revenue with creators. And there's an interesting story about YouTube. When YouTube first started, they didn't share revenue with creators, and they were getting sued by everybody. And they began sharing 50% revenue with creators, and they took off like crazy because it led to an explosion of creativity once you shared revenue with the creators. And now YouTube is worth $500 billion. So YouTube is actually worth almost double Netflix, and they share revenue. Both those companies share revenue with all the creators. So you can make, and Spotify just did $16 billion in revenue, shared $12 billion with creators, has a $100 billion market cap, and is profitable. So it proves you can make money and be fair. And that's really what I'm sort of hoping where we can get. So the reason why I think the AI companies haven't done it is twofold. They don't want to, and they say they don't know how to. They don't want to is the main thing, is they just don't want to pay. But they don't know how to is that unlike music where you can count streams, or unlike YouTube where you can count views, there's nothing as obvious to count. So that's why we set out a year ago to figure out a way to unmix the output of generative AI and figure out how to share the revenue with people. And that's basically using AI again to unmix the result, almost like a remix of a song, a remix of an answer. We unmix it and then figure out how to share the revenue with content creators. And since then, of course, content creators love this. What we have to do is convince the AI companies love this. But in the last year, we signed up more than 400 publications and musicians and authors who want that 50-50 rev share. Now we have to convince the AI companies to pay it. But the one thing I wanted to show you was this. This is launching later this month. It's our own search engine that shows very clearly, after you ask a question, 34% of this answer came from The Atlantic, 25% came from Time, 25% came from Fortune, 16% from The Guardian, and that's how the revenue will be shared. Exactly by the unmix of how the answer was formed, and all of them are credited on the right-hand side, so not only do the sources get revenue just for the answer, they also get the link. We want to get back to a one-to-one value exchange, back from this 250 to 1 that ChatGPT is doing right now. So that's the goal. We really hope to get there, and we'll have a great conversation, and we love your ideas on how to make this happen. Thank you very much.
Bill, I'm glad you had that slide about the muffins, because I was worried about all these people having lunch after you showed them the brain and the rat. All right, so first I want to start with the media folks, just quickly to sort of lay out the stakes. And maybe Rich, I'll start with you. Is this issue moderately important, somewhat important, really important, or existential?
It's existential. It's I'll give you some context. Daily Mail Group. We own several different brands. We're a pretty big media company. We have the paper, we have the websites, Mail Online, one of the biggest English language newspaper sites. We have the newspaper, Metro, we have New Scientist magazine. So we have a pretty good perspective on this. We've been around 129 years, a little longer than that. So we've always succeeded by giving our readers content in the place where they want to get it. Historically, we owned the distribution, which was the papers as well. We've survived and we've thrived by figuring out and navigating and adapting to change. Right now, more people read our content than ever before in history, globally around the world, probably approaching 1 billion users a month, readers a month. We see here, this is probably the biggest challenge we've ever faced. And not just us, but publishers and content creators in general. The first foray is this sort of attack on search. You guys know this, I'm sure. People will search. We used to get links and traffic back. That now is being summarized in an answer and no traffic's coming back. And we can talk about the scale of that. That is attacking, really blowing up one of the key pillars of our economic model. And it's just the first thing. And worst of all, the content that's being served back comes from us. So we're not getting that attribution and we're not getting that compensation. And the result will be that the model that supports investment in journalism will go away, will be harder to pull off, and that's obviously not good for national discourse, it's not good for democracy.
All right, David and Anastasia, do you agree with existential? Are you going to shift to moderate irritant?
I don't know, I've been doing a version of one of these jobs since 1996, and every year people said whatever it was existential, but I think it is actually existential. So it's existential that there were just, broadcast television networks in the United States, then there was going to be cable. It was existential that, now there's people saying that cable is existential, the internet was existential, the search advertising that you rightly pointed to, we're worried about being disrupted today, that was at one time existential. I think that what's important to do, because we're doing this, these are all mostly journalism operations that are represented up here, is that you have to believe initially that the basic activity that we're involved with has value. And part of what's insidious about the discussion around this topic is that, of course, some of what's being argued isn't just a bid-ask of our activity, but it's whether it has value at all. If you believe that there is, and at least one of the companies you presented up there earlier, Bill, that there's a right to learn, that LLMs, not the one that you're building, but that LLMs have literally a right to scrape all of our content and sell it back to you for what you have paid for it. Well, that's really a right to steal. Like, you have to believe that the basic journalistic activity that we're doing has value, and then you need to find a strategy to assert that value in the marketplace, and that's why we've come to ProRata, because we think that that's exactly the kind of strategy that we need. So it is absolutely existential, but it begins by asserting our rights and asserting the value of this activity that we're involved with.
Well, one of the ways to look at the fact that there have been so many existential crises is either we in journalism complain and get worried a lot, or we had lots of crises in the past that we figured out and we found solutions to. We made models work. In fact, there's been a lot of problems along the way. All right, so let's go to what I hope will be kind of the meatiest part of this conversation, part two, where we talk about the leverage points and how to shift it. Because what is happening right now is that the price that the large language model companies are offering the media companies for content is plummeting. It's plummeting because they think they have the leverage, because they think they create synthetic data, because they think they don't need us, because they think they have a right to learn. We don't have leverage in the marketplace. There are very few deals. There was a flurry of deals last spring. There are fewer deals now. We all read the press. We see some of them. Lawsuits haven't been solved yet. So the question is, how does this change so the terms of the negotiation change? So Frank, why don't I jump to you? You went through this in the music industry. You got through it. You did fine. Some carnage along the way, but you did fine. How did the leverage change? And then let's have everybody, we'll start with Anastasia, talk about how we think it will change in media.
Yeah, thank you. So you alluded to that we've been through a lot of technological changes in the music industry. And may I remind you really quick, we went from vinyl to CD, from CD to download, from download to then streaming, and a lot of the companies we've seen here, Spotify, YouTube, and others, we then licensed at one point. You will probably remember the turn of the century, the year 2000, where MP3 was invented, and the music industry then fought for the right of the artists. We sued customers. We got a lot of backlash where we were named, backward oriented, etc., etc. But we always were convinced that, the art, the creation, that is worth something, and that this is protected by copyrights. And I saw your muffin stand example here, and it kind of reminded me onto where we were then. Now, we have always, on the other side, embraced technology. We cut deals with Spotify, we cut deals with YouTube. We were able, to see the technology coming and then do deals with them. But the big difference is that, you know, we are now in a position where big tech companies use our rights, the rights of our artists, without allowance, without even coming to us. They scrape the internet, they take in all the music, they take in all the lyrics, and there is not even an ask for it. And that is what we need to change right now. And how are we going to change this? We will negotiate, we will do litigation, and we have to have a strong copyright. And that is true for the music, and that is true for everybody here as well. An exception from copyright called TDM, where especially there's a discussion in the UK right now, cannot happen. Because why should there be an exception for anybody making use of creations, you know, for free and not paying for this? It does not make any sense. And we need to be aware of it, that the text and data mining exception is not good. And an idea of opting out, that's what the idea is. They want us, the creatives, to opt out of them taking all our art. You know, it doesn't make sense either, because it implies that, you know, every copyright is for free, except you say no. Why should creatives or journalists or anybody in the film or book industry, why should we carry that burden? We have another job. We want to create with our artists. So we cannot have this. And you know, those are the pieces how we're going to leverage, hopefully, and we want to work with AI companies. As long as AI is responsible, as long as AI is transparent, and we do. We have cut deals with 20 AI companies. We use them, you know, Eminem did a video with AI. Kendrick Lamar did a video with AI. We just had a new song from Brenda Lee, Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, in Spanish, done by AI. In production, we use AI, but only, and we work with Bill. Because, you know, we want to have transparency and we want to share, you know, and have a share on the revenues that these companies are making. So we are open, we embrace it, but we have to have rules that make it transparent and fair.
And can I ask you one little bit of history in there? So I remember when you sued the customers, and I remember thinking that that turned public opinion against you. And public opinion is important because it shapes Congress, it shapes a lot of the legislation that will come. And maybe I thought it was bad for you because I had long hair and was a young editor at Wired magazine, as opposed to a full-on capitalist that I am now. But explain to me how public opinion shifted during that period, because you eventually got public opinion on your side. Napster became the bad guys, you became the good guys, but early on, Napster was the good guys, you guys were the bad guys.
Yeah, I think, you know, over time and over a lot of communication, and also, if I may say so, with the help of media, you know, that shifted a little bit. In public opinion, you know, then turned around, and they understood that an artist, you know, who's putting sometimes years into creating, you know, that work must be worth something. It cannot be for free. And they then wanted to support the artist, you know, the long hair, yourselves at the time. But it took us a while, really, you know, and, you know, image-wise, you know, we had to come around, but that at one point, you know, I think we had to just go through this. And we had to kind of, you know, take it in. It was very unpleasant at the time. But the public opinion and ultimately the consumer understand, hey, maybe that's right. Maybe artists need to be supported, and maybe they need to be compensated for what they actually create. Because we do want to enjoy this in the future. And if we don't compensate, if we don't give them the money to make a living, there will not be no artists in the future. And that slowly kind of like, you know, got into the consumers as well.
All right, Anastasia?
Oh, hi. Yeah. I actually want to challenge the concept of good and bad guys and gals here for a second. There is this quote that comes to mind by Thomas Jefferson, which goes along the following lines. If you want to get something different, you should be prepared to do something different. And I think that there is no good and bad guys in this whole topic, regardless of which angle and which chair you sit on. What I really think is there are a bunch of people who are trying to do something different. So to your point about competitive advantage, what comes to my mind are a couple of things. Number one, well, do something about it, right? Don't sit on the sidelines. Several people still sit on the sidelines. I don't think that that's the approach that is going to take you anywhere at all. Now, proceed with caution, right? You don't want to dive in and be silly crazy about certain deals or certain things. Just analyze, right, what you're doing. But where we can get also advantage is actually by making content so important and so interesting and so valuable that the summary does not give it the justice, right? At the end of the day, you can think about the best book you've ever read, right? Doesn't matter, Great Gatsby, Anna Karenina, the list goes on and on. Can you read the book cover and understand what it is about? Sure, you can. But can you really understand what's happening and understand the dynamics without reading it? No way. And I'd like to frame our thinking into that direction as well, that humans want to get better at something, right? Most humans have the internal desire to get better at something, to learn something. And I feel like our job and our competitive advantage actually lies in fostering that desire. So all of us here in the room can contribute into that. So that's why in my mind, right, is the lady with the muffins still a bad lady? No, there is a demand for muffins, and here she is. And I feel like there is demand for high quality content, and it is our job, right, while we're balancing the long-term growth and the short-term profitability, because in this industry it's very, very hard. While we're doing that, we have to be thinking about the bigger picture and how do we ultimately deliver the highest level of content and standards.
So, and Anastasia, as you make all these wonderful muffins, unfortunately.
Yes, I'm a terrible cook, by the way, FYI.
Well, you've also been negotiating, right? You signed a deal with ProRata, you signed a deal with Perplexity. You've presumably turned down a number of other deals. Explain the sort of the game theory and the workflow you go through as you're evaluating a proposed deal with an AI partner.
Okay, so I have actually like a little funny story here. Couple of deals that we turned down went the following way. Somebody comes in, and you can fill in the blank with number of players in the space, and they would say, well, we'll give you this, we'll give you that, we'll help you optimize some of your tech solutions, like maybe the search on the website or something else. And for that, you're going to open up the gates and give it to us for free. Oh, and by the way, maybe you license our brand to us at some point in some capacity. And I would say, thank you very much, it was nice to meet you, goodbye, right? And people would walk away, they would be a little shocked, hopefully not offended, because I would be very direct, thank you, not for us. So there were a bunch of deals like that. When we look at deals, we always look at the deal as fair, right? At the end of the day, for me, it's a fairness game. If you get fair terms, then the deal is a good deal. You may make a lot of money, you may make little money on it, but if it's fair, take the deal. If the deal is not fair, you know what? It doesn't matter how sexy it may sound or how good the other partner sounds to be. If it's not fair, we just walk away. And that's how I look at it.
I want to ask a little bit about legislation. Let's talk to the Europeans. David, you're kind of a fake European, so maybe we'll go to Rich. How do you think that Europe is going to regulate on this issue? What's going to happen first? What's going to happen after that? And then David, you can follow up.
I think I may be as fake as you touched on the law as it happens in the as it's happening in the UK, and I think the UK is an interesting place for this battle to come down because copyright law was actually invented in England a long time ago. And as was described, there is this movement for the opt-out, and what he's referring to, if you didn't know, is the government there said change the copyright law or interpret the copyright law so that it can be scraped for large language model training. And as we said, we don't like the opt-out, we think it's terrible for small publishers, we think it's really bad for downstream plagiarism, etc. But I think it's important to understand the government's trying to thread a deal, particularly the UK government. The UK is an interesting place. It's got a higher percentage of people in the workforce and a higher percentage of the GDP that is involved in creative industry, music, film, news and publishing, although hopefully that's not that creative. But they, at the same time, the government they don't want to upset or scare away big tech. They want the jobs, they want the tax revenue, they want the innovation economy. And so they're trying to figure out how do we thread the needle. We ran an event in London last week. Bill and the team attended, and we got great turnout from people involved on all sides of the issue. We want to try to find a solution, and we think that ProRata is the way to do that. Again, what we're looking for is just compensation, is attribution compensation, and this could thread that.
David, are there regulatory or legislative models that you think are particularly good that would help this problem?
Generally speaking, because we're talking about the future here, technology is going to get there first, news media second, and government third. So here we are right in the middle of that. I think, we're fielding journalists, cameras in Syria, Southern California, all around the world every day. We're trying to figure out how to provide a future for that activity. As we look at this solution, and I think the way we ask ourselves the question you asked Anastasia, where's this all going, is thinking in particular about video. We talked a lot about text, a little bit about audio, and actually a lot of the dialogue around AI and AI search is around text and audio. But it's coming for video, the way video came for so many forms of storytelling. I think one thing we like about this solution, and so the litmus test that we apply to other solutions for regulatory or other purposes, how likely is it to have a story to tell in video, and that's really where we want to be.
I actually second that. For us as well, video is super important. My editor chief Alison Chantel is sitting over there. She and I have been working a lot on the video and video initiatives. I'm with you in your camp as well. I think video is a huge part of the future, especially given how the modern consumer consumes information and new knowledge acquisition.
David, can I push on one point there or one question on there? Tech gets their first, media gets their second, government gets their third. Does that mean that you don't think that government is at all likely to change the dynamic here by, say, passing a law that the AI companies must compensate creators, or passing a law, the most simple law would be that the AI companies have to declare what they trained on, which would make everything much simpler. Do you not think the government has a role? Do you think it's kind of hopeless, or do you think it's just sort of, we should put that to the side while we focus on the other stuff?
Two things. First, we're a regulation taker, not a regulation maker. But I think more than that, it's not that we don't think they have a role to play or could change the game when they do arrive on the scene. It's just that what are the facts on the ground that they're going to find when they arrive? And that's why what we're trying to do, just as Sky News is a news organization or as part of a larger media conglomerate, is help define those facts in the most favorable way for a future for news media and journalism.
Got it. Super interesting. Let me ask Bill, I'm going to go to sort of technical wonky stuff, and I feel like you're the man to ask. So last night, I spoke with Matthew Prince of Cloudflare. He said that the CDN layer of the internet might get into this and may well block AI companies from scraping media sites, just as it blocks hackers and other exfiltration attempts. You can imagine other layers on the stack, right? When you read a piece of content, there's your ISP, there's CDN, there's a whole series of layers. Who else could be useful in the stack who is not being useful right now in changing the dynamics so that eventually the AI companies do need to compensate the rights holders?
Yeah, going back on the legal front and then coming back to this. I was thinking back to what you said about the legal front with Napster. So think about Napster was sharing music on a peer-to-peer network, relatively low-quality versions of written songs. Sometimes you wouldn't even get the right song that you were trying to download. Sometimes it'd be bad quality. And then Napster, you were going up, the music industry was going up, against a couple of $10 billion companies, or Napster, a sub $1 billion company. Today we have $1 trillion companies. We're going up against $1 trillion companies, which maybe in ChatGPT's case, 150 billion, so on its way to $1 trillion company. And they have a lot of lobbyists and a lot of clout, and just like you said, Mitch, UK doesn't want to lose them, and that scares them. So we have to make sure that we come back with enough of a fight against them. So there's a legal fight, and I do think we should push really, really hard on the legal front to do exactly as you said. It should not be out. You said it better than I've ever heard it. This is copyrighted material. That was the purpose of the copyright in the first place. You don't have to do something in addition to protect it. That was it. But now, Cloudflare comes along, and we have the guy, CEO of Cloudflare, Matthew Prince, who's really also an aggressive believer that content producers are being ripped off. And he's in the middle of 35% of creative content traffic. And he's willing to say, hey, I'm willing to maybe put a blocker on it. So that is fantastic. We need to find more fans of human creativity in that path. So you asked me, who else is there? I don't know other CEOs of companies like that have that view, but I just met Matthew at DLD, and now we're talking about this, and we need to find more of them. So So if anyone here knows other people who, like you said, are elsewhere in the stack, who are supporters of human creativity, who could play a role until government gets around, that would be fantastic.
The relationships between media and the tech industry, I may have heard, aren't as good as they used to be, but we will look for all those wonderful people.
What about the investors? You talked about how much money is going into all these AI companies.
That's an interesting one.
Don't the investors want to be clean? Don't they risk that their money is going to be used on litigation unless they find a way to compensate the people that create the content that's being used?
Yeah, we're finding the smaller LLMs who are being sued are coming to us and saying, we'd like to work with you, we'd like to start sharing revenue 50-50 to stop the lawsuits. The bigger companies like ChatGPT are saying, well, we have enough money to fight it out, let's see what happens with the New York Times. But if we can start getting some wins along the way, that would be pretty fantastic.
I like that, though I'm slightly skeptical. I was talking to an investor last night who had invested in an AI company. And I said, you know, I think the founder of that company is a sociopath. And the investor said, I know, it's true, but returns look good. So I'm not sure that we'll win entirely, but we might. There are certainly investors who will care a lot about this. What about lawsuits? Have any of you joined lawsuits here? Have any of you considered lawsuits? Why did you not join them? Sarah Fisher's in the room. She'll be happy to write down whatever you say and put it right in access. David?
I mean, it's a blunt force. I mean, have we considered lawsuits? And when you had said that, I was running through the various list of non-disclosure agreements and lawsuits we might be a party to. But in
That's
this
actually,
particular-
it's a totally unfair way to ask the question. Let me ask you this way. Obviously, you can't disclose whether you've ever considered, whether you're part to one, whether one might be coming, whether you might be part of a joint group, whatever. How would you think about the game theory of whether to, along with other publishers, join a lawsuit about an AI company? What would be the factors that go into it? And maybe Anastasia, you can talk about that in the same context you talked about when they do a deal. Or David is going to pass it right to Anastasia.
Yeah, he wants to pass it right to me.
I'm trying not to get sued.
Yeah, that's a special experience. I don't wish it upon anybody. Well, 2 points. One, to your earlier point, I feel like pretty much every single person in this whole entire village had invested into some sort of an AI company, okay? And the reason that people did it, because one, the founders are crazy and we love them for them, and two, you also want to diversify your investments, right? Corporate, professional, personal, doesn't matter. The similar goes for the lawsuit. They could be crazy, they could be right, and the question is, from the game theory, do you believe that you're diversifying your strategy by joining a lawsuit, right? So I think that to your point about the gaming theory, what you really have to think through, does it ultimately yield to a diversification of your business in the long run? And everybody will have to travel the journey and figure it out. We for now sitting and watching, you know, as sort of like a big dragon and big dragon are fighting, the monkey sits in the tree and watches. So we're right now the monkey in the tree and watching.
Maybe.
Frank, you've been a dragon.
Yeah, we're not watching. We actually.
Welcome, dragon.
But by the way, I just want to make that point. Yeah, I agree with you. It's not about the bad and the good guy. As I said, we do embrace technology and we do work together with AI companies, but we cannot allow, the unauthorized usage of our copyright. So we do sue, and we do get music companies together, and we do get, collecting societies in the boat, and we all kind of like join the view of, this needs to be solved. And I assume that a couple of the companies that we do sue in America, and that I can't obviously, disclose anything else, will come to you now, other than the big ones. Right, and those trillion-dollar companies, we had to fight them. We had YouTube. You mentioned the example. We finally got to terms with them, and look where they are right now. So I think it's one of the tools actually to do so, to make your point clear, and then on the other hand side, negotiate for a responsible, ethical AI. That's that's our way forward.
I think one word that Bill uses always in describing this technology is creativity. And I think where we want to be as an industry is taking a positive step to establish the value of creativity and to say that creative product is superior to product that's not. I mean, it certainly would be possible to learn off of data that doesn't include any of the categories that are represented on this panel, but it would be really inferior. And so all of this, yes, some of it's going to be tactical, and legal action may be part of that. But all this is basically about establishing a price in a really difficult bid-ask environment as price for creativity, journalistic or otherwise.
Well, Nick, you signed a deal. You got to answer your own question.
I'm a moderator. I'm a moderator.
Let's do it, let's do it.
I'd like to add one thing. Summarizing what you said earlier, Anastasia, about making quality, and what you just said, David, about making something, Anastasia, that is so good that people don't want to read the summary. And then summarizing what you said earlier about the early days of Napster. My recollection of Napster, and almost everybody here lived it, so maybe you could add color to it. So Napster is sharing all these songs. They are of bad quality and badly organized. Then there's a bunch of lawsuits. And then they sue some of the users as well, so there's some anger about that. Then some of the artists come out and say, hey, I think I remember Madonna coming out and saying, hey, we really think it's fair for you support us to make a living. And then Steve Jobs comes along and says, hey, labels, would you be willing to break up your albums? I know you don't want to, and sell them for 99 cents a song. We'll make a really nice organized store. It'll be all quality downloads. They'll all be in full resolution. You can search for the artist and be guaranteed to get the song you want. We'll share the revenue with you, 70%, and the three big labels agreed. And then users started saying, well, do I want to go to this sketchy thing or to the real thing? I support the artist over here. You gradually shifted public opinion over a period of about 2 years. The lawsuits were going on, the public pressure was going on, and a better quality product was going on. So it was a little bit of everything. And I think we do the same thing here.
Well, that is the perfect segue into the next segment, which is what will this better product be, right? So in the story of the music industry, there's all this pressure, there's all this change in leverage, there's change in public opinion. Steve Jobs comes along, makes a product, we start using that product. Spotify comes along, we start using that product. Maybe good things, maybe bad things about the way it ended up. But there was a solution. So what is the solution here? There are a bunch of companies out there, ProRata, obviously. Bought you the lunch, they're very nice, they're doing quite well. Right? That's one idea. There's Tolbit, there's ScalePost, there's a whole bunch of other companies that are trying to get in the middle of the relationship between the large language models and the media companies. What are the other business models? What is the thing that the Steve Jobs in this room should build that will solve this problem? Anybody can answer that.
Well, I'm not going to answer that yet. I'm just going to say we also need to shift public opinion. We need to shift public opinion that you should go use the search engine that's treating creators fairly. And that's what Steve Jobs did with Apple Music. And independent of the technology that you choose to make that happen, it's that fairness issue that I think is important.
That is extremely important.
And maybe, before we get on to the business model, the foundation for any business model needs to be, again, a copyright with no exception. It needs to have three things from my point of view. One, it needs to treat the copyright with no exception fairly. Second, it needs to really be transparent. In the EU AI Act, there is a transparency clause in there which says it needs to be transparent when AI company use copyrighted material. And then the last point is that I don't think that AI-produced music or content needs to be protected by copyright law because it is something different. It is not human copyright. So that's not what copyright is for. So those are the three fundamentals. And then if we got that straight, then we build business models. And as I said, building business models technically, is possible in many ways. When I'll give you another example. We work with the Beatles. And 40 years ago, John Lennon, had a mono-take, song, and it was not produced, nothing. And then we used AI with the estate of the Beatles, under their permission, with McCartney and with the others, and then we filtered out his voice to a standalone track, and then we produced a song, and we made a new Beatles song. And you can watch it, you can look it up on YouTube. How wonderful AI as a business model then can actually operate. And then, we sold the song, we sold the documentary, we made business out of this. So there's many ways to come up with a business model to use AI. YouTube, the same thing, if I may say so, because people may be interested. With Björn Ulvaeus from ABBA, with other artists, we're trying, to allow YouTube to give creators their voices or their music to create new music and new songs but in an environment that is kind of like, protected, where then after, if there is revenue, then it's going to be shared. So those are 2 examples for how to make business models out of with AI.
We actually have a lot to learn in this industry from music. From the examples you just gave to one other, I realized when you cover a song, the original artist gets credit. Think of some of these AI things like a cover. You're taking content from someone else and you're making a slightly new version of it. And if you're making money with that, that still has to be shared with the original artist. And the great cover of Tracy Chapman's song this past year was a huge example. She got a huge royalty check this year because her song from way back when got covered, and both artists made money. And that's exactly what should be emulated, I think, in this.
The other thing we're going to have to do, though, is that I think as industry, we do need good technology partners. We do need a good legal and regulatory strategy. But we also do need to not be lazy about and reconnect with what made these enterprises special in the first place. I mean, in a journalism context, AI today can tell you what's already out there. And so the amount of energy in news media that's gone to sort of reorganizing the already known facts in some sort of package that you would receive at a particular night and a particular time is on its way to being dead. But the actual core journalistic operation, revealing something that has not been previously known, 2 people familiar with Nick's thinking say he's going to do this. AI will be somewhat predictive. Some of those things it may get to, but that's actually what we provide, and we need, as industry, to move more and more resource to those kinds of activities and away from just moving pieces around, moving bits around that they can tell you next.
That's a great point. David, I think it was a note to your staff, had maybe my favorite sentence really explaining this. I can't remember exactly what it is, you would know who you wrote it, but it was something like AI devalues what is known and adds value to what is unknown, which is a great message for media companies. Are all the media executives here leaning into the things that AI can do, into reporting, into style, into scoops?
Yeah, I think we all have to work, not just to stop this deal, but to use AI to create better products. It'll work on the advertising, I'm sure that's gonna help. It'll work in personalization. It's been almost 2.5 years since the ChatGPT moment, and I would say other than some use cases around efficiency, no one in our space, or we're just starting to see the first of the attempts to do it and use it in a way that's innovative in terms of product for readers and viewers. I'll credit our friends from Time Magazine as being one of the leaders here, one of the first products with the Person of the Year product last year, where we started to see how it could be used. We're gonna have to lean in on that. But that's gonna cost some money, that's gonna cost some investment, and we're gonna need to be compensated in order to do that.
All right, so we have some good ideas on what journalism should do to maximize the value it creates. Lots of good ideas on how to shift the leverage points. Questions from the audience, and if you are able to propose an entirely new business model, it is persuasive. It is a special bottle of secret tequila in the back. Yes, fire.
I am Dominic.
Yes, and also this is very good form. Introduce yourself when you ask your question. Thank you so much.
Dominic, I'm CEO of ProRata.ai, and thank you for a fantastic discussion. I loved it. And I have a very short comment, maybe answering the question that will lead me to the question itself. So coming back to the slide that you will show at the beginning, there are searches and AI searches. And I think about them as a distribution channel for content. And what amazes me is that in a traditional search, content producers write content in a way that is easily indexed and promoted by Google. And you fight to be higher in the search in the search results page. In the AI search, new industry, you don't want to be indexed. Why? Because the incentives are not well structured. In the traditional search, you earn money by showing ads. When people use ChatGPT, they don't go to your page, but you don't earn money from ads. So my question is, media companies have always been at the forefront of innovations. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, ChatGPT and OpenAI had no traffic. You have traffic. You have content. And we know that content is key. Why don't you work together to build the remaining part? Your LLM that is trained on your unique content, and use the traffic that you already have to not ask that new distribution channel to share money with you, or pay you for content, but you can do it.
This is close to Bill's idea.
Wait, can I answer this one? Okay, so Alison and I and the rest of our team at Fortune, we actually did build our own LLM. And we had some help from Accenture, we did build it, we started to test it out, we decided it's not ready for exactly what you said because that was the original idea. So now we're kind of like revamping as to what we want to do with it, right? And what we really decided that what we really want to do is that play internally with it to a point that we create a lot of use cases where you eventually scale it up and get to what you said. But kind of like if you were to meet me 18 months ago and talk to us, that's what I would tell you that I would like to do. Now the proof is in the pudding. Can it be done, right? It cannot be done with the level of accuracy that we as media brands will be proud to stand behind. Because for us, right, it's like being a doctor, being in media, you cannot be wrong, or try not to be wrong. And that's a tricky part.
Gary.
I just want to make a comment, actually, which is we have a particular form of AI right now, which you might call black box AI. Most of generative AI is this way. It takes a bunch of information, breaks it up into little bits, and then it reconstitutes it in statistically probable ways. And it loses track, and it's part of what Bill is thinking about. It loses track of what it's doing as it builds that stuff. It is possible, in principle, to build AI that is more transparent, that is white box rather than black box, where we understand how any given output relates to its inputs. I think you built a search engine that works in that way. We should be hoping for the world to move to more transparent and interpretable AI for many reasons. It's more debuggable, but also it would be a lot easier to resolve these questions if we did have clarity about what are the influences effectively on the output. It's great that Bill is trying to constitute better AI can do that.
Chris?
Chris Anderson from TED. So it's a bit of a philosophical question as much as anything. We've used the language of copyright violation and so forth here. It really doesn't feel like that's really what's happening. It's not. The problem isn't that AI is spitting out word for word what is written, by one of your journalists or music or whatever. It's remixing, and traditionally. There's been a very liberal view about remixing. I mean, Steve Jobs spoke, everything is remixed. There's a TED talk that says that everything is remixed. Led Zeppelin, for goodness sake, won a court case for Stairway to Heaven when it felt pretty much exactly like another song that had clearly influenced it. So all of creativity, to some extent, is pulling in from other sources. And I guess I've got, so the two questions are, one is for Bill, can you really use technology to find legitimately the percentage of all these different sources that went into something? That seems like an astonishing and almost impossible technical feat to me. And then secondly, even if you could do that, how do you win the argument that this isn't just a legitimate remix like everything else is a remix?
I think the difference is maybe a human remix versus an automatic computer-generated remix. A human remix still, as a human, you're allowed to read a physics textbook and then use the formulas that are in there to invent something new. But if you scan all of that in and then just regurgitate that slightly differently, that's a fuzzy challenge about whether that really is a legitimate remix. But that's a tough question, I agree with you. On the question of how you figure out what was used, think of two examples. Think of music first. So with Shazam, if ever you used it, you hold your phone up in a noisy restaurant, you sample a song for 10 seconds, we get a digital signature of it. There's a digital signature of all million songs, and then you compare it, you look for a match that meets 99%, and you say this is the song. But imagine for a AI-generated song, instead, you take a 10-second sample throughout the song, you compare it to all the other 10-second samples, but you do a fuzzy match. And you actually can get a vector distance that says, this is 34% like this, and 15% like that, and 12% like these lyrics. It's just math to do that. And as long as the creatives agree with that percentage, then you have something that should be fair. Same thing with words. When we look at the output of an article, we look for the novel and unique claims in the article, in the output. And then we look for those novel or unique claims from the Fortune article, or the Time article, or from Sky News, or from Guardian, or from, so for general facts, those are going to be everywhere, and there's no value in the remix of that. A little bit like you were saying earlier, David, you want to take something that's new and novel, that's where the value add comes from. So what we do with our algorithms, we search for those new and novel things and say, who said those things first? to try and give the proportional credit. It's not perfect, but it's way better than giving zero. And again, as long as the content producer agrees with that accounting, then we think it's fair. But to your first question, of course it's a challenge. It is a challenge. But if an algorithm can just scrape up everything, generate a new business model, and pay out nothing, we think that's also unfair. So we're trying to find the middle ground, and 50-50 feels like a fair middle ground that allows an AI company to make money and allows a creator to make money.
Azim.
Thank you, Nick. Azim Azar from Exponential View. Bill, very happy to be one of your first content partners. I want to talk about fairness, and this connects also to Chris's point. Copyright is a compromise. It's a legal structure that represents an economic compromise across consensus in the society. Over the last 100 years, of course, copyright terms have expanded dramatically. And to the copyright owners, so there's one question I would ask is, as you make this case, and it's a strong business and moral case, don't you think it's also time to revisit the other parts of copyright in this exponential, fast-moving world, specifically term lengths?
And that would make sense because look at how the technology has changed and the law has not. But that's back to what you were saying, David, about the technology moves fast and the law is way, way behind. Hopefully, some of these lawsuits might lead to some changes. Or some.
I was just curious about the appetite of your co-panelists to make that as part of the quid pro quo.
Yeah, that would be great. Any other thoughts?
I mean, it would be a quid pro quo with the United States Congress. I mean, it's not a quid pro quo with the AI companies. I mean, it's a harder to go. I would love it if they modify copyright law. The question that Chris raised is a huge one. Under current copyright law, the four-part test of fair use, it is not clear if we win or lose, but it also does seem unfair that there has been this massive exchange without any of the value coming back to the media creators or the content creators. So we have a situation where the balance is totally unfair, but the law is totally ambiguous. So one thing you could do is rewrite the law to make a more fair balance. So I would love that. If you are able to get any bills to the United States Congress, I will talk to you and we'll figure it out.
Not a citizen, unfortunately.
So, James.
Bill, a question for you. So my name's James Hardy. I'm an editor founder of Tortoise. We just bought a very old newspaper. Bill, I just want to ask you, I'm worried about stuff. Just stuff. Just the volume of stuff. I was listening to you and thinking, we can move away from this. At the end of this hour, we could produce a video, as David said. We could produce individualized videos. We could produce them all in separate languages. In other words, we could produce thousands of hours of content on the back of this stuff. And a distilled version of this conversation, even if you protect the copyright of it, can't compete with the volume of stuff. So my worry is about pricing and non-participation. That in the event that you defend copyright, are we still seeing such a fraction of traffic that we don't have an advertising model for journalism and media, and we don't have an economic model for what we do?
Well, here's how I hope things will change. And there is some evidence that it's changing that direction already. In the former era of search, those last 2 decades, it was funded by paid clicks leaving the site. So Google scraped everything. They had a snippet of a New York Times article as the loss leader to get you to Google, and then they hoped you clicked on a paid link to leave, and you got your search for free. Now, people are searching and just want the answer. I just want to get the answer. And people are willing to pay a subscription price for that. Obviously, people are paying $20 a month to ChatGPT, so $2 to $5 billion a year. So they could pay out $2.5 billion a year outbound. I think that we'll have a day not too soon, not too far away, where through your glasses, through your AirPods, as you're walking through life, you're asking a question, you're getting answers fed back to you, and you'll pay a subscription for that to get the best answer. And when you ask a question of an LLM, it will go search all the best content out there. You might even pay a premium to have access to really, really good stuff. And then you'll get your answer, and that revenue is significant. Search is basically the most valuable thing on the planet. Search is worth trillions of dollars. The idea that it's the initiation of all of our activity in life. So it's so valuable to be at the start of those transactions, and people want good answers they're willing to pay for. So I think that there's a great business model to be made by having people subscribe to great content, ask their questions, and have revenue go out to the people who write the great stuff. So for this, just quickly, for this event, let's say a bunch of reporters wrote up this event, and then someone asked a question about it. The LLM will go find which reporter wrote the content that best answers that person's question. Not who did the best coverage, Who answered the question the person asked? Someone might ask about the attendees. Someone asked about what was the main themes. Whatever the person asked, they'll get their answer. They might end up effectively paying about $1 for that answer because they're $20 a month was split over 20 queries or whatever. And that dollar, 50 cents, will go out to that reporter. Multiplied by millions of users, it could be a really, really significant business model.
Can we get a microphone in the back just so everybody can hear? We've got time for, I don't know, 2 or 3 more questions.
These are
Well, actually, so David will go first because he's sitting next to me. He can use my microphone.
Thank you, Stephanie. So I'm David Kenny. I run Nielsen. So we in 55 countries every day measure what people do. There's a big difference between this and music, which is about what you can get the popular understanding of citizens to agree with you. And this is where I would propose there's some additional work to be done. First of all, there was a populist president inaugurated yesterday in the United States. There were more LLMs on the stage than journalists because they helped him. What we know from Nielsen, if we look at people under the age of 30, more people trust a chatbot than a media company. Wow. It's not just us, they trust a chatbot more than a doctor for medical advice as well, because they believe it synthesized everything. I think there's an enormous trust problem, and I think some of it was brought on by some media companies. There was one on the stage yesterday named Rupert. But anyway, what I would say is it's really important, I think, that we all engage using LLMs to find a way to build more understanding and more trust. To believe that just having them believe in the fifth estate and the way journalism is worked, it's not going to happen. We've lost this generation. We need to win them back.
Can we respond to that?
Well, what if, look, media are always shape-shifting. And so every time a new media innovation comes along, there's a tendency to declare that media is dead because it's been replaced by. Right. So in the last year, it's like, media are dead because now there's podcasting, which is a form of media, which many of the most successful ones have been around for 10 years, and they built an audience, and so on. So some of what's new, some of what's old is new again, in terms of media are constantly shape-shifting, and some of the things that are being assigned like a different identity are actually just media in a different form, I would say. The other question is...
But if you shifted enough, they were certainly trusting.
No, look, like, trust is a problem right now, and there is a lot of blame to go around right now. But some of the problem is actually, just going up what James was saying before, what if there actually isn't that much stuff? So, if the consumer internet is about 30 years old and the iPhone started in 2009 and there's sort of an explosion of stuff online, and that's what LLMs can learn from. It's actually not a lot of stuff in the context of all human knowledge, a couple thousand years ago. And so a lot of what needs to be figured out is like, what are going to be the terms of trade around information going forward when the basic stuff that's available to learn off of today, there actually isn't very much of it in the scheme of things, and it isn't very good.
Young people are hard. My 14-year-old son was coming down the stairs in an Atlantic sweatshirt about 2 days ago. And I said to him, hey, what do you think of the brand on your sweatshirt? And he looks at me and goes, same as Chick-fil-A. Awesome product, but I don't like the management. In the back.
Martin Kahn, I'm president of Cohere, so we're a foundational LM creator, but just for enterprise. I think this is primarily a consumer discussion, and previously I was CFO of YouTube, so I know very well the win-win with the music industry, the creative industry. And one of the things I haven't heard, I actually did just hear the last couple of comments, but I was going to ask about who's actually paying for this, because we're hearing a lot about it's unfair and stealing and so on. To be quite honest, there really is not very much money here yet. 5 billion sounds like a lot, but they maybe have, I don't know what the number is, 5 million paid users and 300 free users. They can't serve advertising to them, which is why they're losing $14 billion a year. YouTube is now about 50 billion in revenue. Google search is 180, probably even higher these days. So there's a lot there to share. So I'd love to hear, it's a great problem to have, but right now there really isn't that much that's being paid for. Paid search has never worked. maybe it does, but 5 million users for a ChatGPT Premium or whatever it's called, compared to 3 billion users of Google Search or 2.8 billion daily active users on YouTube is not even a rounding error. And we need to be careful. We can't confuse market capitalization and venture capital funding with money. I've heard that from the music industry. Google's worth $1 trillion at the time. You can afford to pay X, Y, Z. It's like you can afford to pay a percentage of what you're bringing in, which is the model that then worked, and both industries did very well. But I'd love to hear your perspectives as you dial it forward. Will people be paying $50, $100 a month for consumer chatbots the way that we pay for mobile phone subscriptions, broadband, Netflix, the advertising value of YouTube and Google Search? How is that going to happen? Because unless there's actual revenue there, there's nothing really to split. Those percentages don't mean a lot if that number stays small. So I'd love to hear how you think the consumer behavior will be in terms of how will they pay for this? How will they consume this?
Can I maybe just one comment before my valued panelists answer that question, because I can. But when we were in the situation, exactly what you described, right? We started off to embrace those models, and we said, okay, we invested billions into our catalogs. Now here comes some startup along, and they want to make use of our catalogs. And we were at one point when we started this in a framework where we said, okay, you need to pay advances so that we allow you. We then got away from this and said, hey, you know what? You can use this. You can try your business model as long as I see and as we see a fair share when the model is actually working. And that happened then over time. That happened with YouTube and many others as well. So I think the foundation is you agree on the principle of a fair share, and then when the money comes in, then you're good. And so that needs to be the way forward. And if the money will come in, you guys need to answer that.
Well, I'll give you my take on this. So in terms of the volume and subscribers and subscriptions in general in the world, my take on it is the following. I think that if it is highly specialized knowledge, people would always pay for highly specialized knowledge in any industry, regardless of what it is, right? That is a narrow group, but it's a price insensitive group, right? They would pay any amount of money for highly specialized knowledge, especially if it is unique, right? Layer number one. Now, we talked about the trust issues, right? And especially with the younger generation. Well, that is actually where the work needs to happen, because as the younger generation, a generation of current teens are growing up, the trust has to change. But together with it, what the bigger issue that we didn't mention yet? Mental health. Because the trust issues are driven by mental health. The suicide rates are the highest they've ever been among teens right now in developed countries. Why, right? You live in a developed country. You have everything. You have food, education, entertainment. But how come, the mental issues are right? Depression, suicide, all of that. So I feel like the work actually has to start there. And as you're dealing with that, you really actually have to hope that with that comes additional knowledge acquisition, and that younger generation wants to get quality content. Because right now, it's full of garbage, right? So the knowledge acquisition doesn't happen from garbage content. It actually happens from quality content. And I feel like ultimately, while you, in essence, mining your customers in the top level, you have to start thinking about how you do bring up the generation of customers. And it's not age related, it's actually mentality, mental state related. How do you bring them up to understand that the quality content is more important? And how to do that, I do not know.
Martin, can I propose an idea? So these AI companies are very cash poor, I agree, but they're extremely valuable, they're equity rich. So the natural thing would be to transfer some of what they have, much of which is equity. Now the problem with that is, of course, you need lawyers, warrants, it's complicated. But why couldn't there be a consortium of journalistic entities that get together and essentially say, we got one lawyer, running publications, we have a hell of a lot of tokens, you want to scrape those tokens? Sure, you can pay for it, either with cash or with equity. And then, whatever the LLM is, gives a tiny fraction of the equity in which they're rich to this journalism consortium, and then we are hedged against all the value that is created on the content we have. Good idea, bad idea?
Can I respond directly to that?
All right.
I think that's a really interesting idea. And the question came up, why don't you do this yourselves? I also, unfortunately, am a reform consultant. I was a senior partner at BCG. One of the things we did was create a business called Next Issue Media, that was renamed Texture, which was a JV of the 5 biggest publishers in New York. Condé Nast, Hearst, Time, Meredith and News Corp and then Rogers Publishing came in from Canada. This was to create the Netflix of magazines, right? Which was a capitalized JV. There were 6 antitrust lawyers in the room every meeting, one from each of the publishers and one from the JV. That was exactly the idea, Nick. It was let's create this ourselves. KKR invested into it. Eventually that was sold to Apple. It's now the forms the nucleus of Apple News Plus. The issue there was that those companies, because their competitors, couldn't cannibalize their traditional business model. If they could have, that could have potentially become, something quite valuable. JVs are so hard because no one wants to proactively cannibalize their business model, especially if they may retire in 3 years or whatever the case may be. But I think the idea that came up here, don't do it yourself, by the way. There are a lot of companies, I happen to know one, that pays my salary, that actually have a business model about taking state-of-the-art foundational models and customize them extremely deeply and proprietarily to then deploy wherever you want them with your data. I think that could be a very interesting model. The question is, can an industry consortium actually succeed when they are in effect cannibalizing the traditional model?
Wait, so the idea would be, ProRata has this coalition, for example, ProRata's next product could be, hey, we actually now have a custom trade large language models. It's not just the GIST search engine, it actually will solve these problems for these companies.
Exactly. Well, custom trained foundational models, and then the best search and retrieval RAG frameworks that actually get the latest up-to-date information on each of them. Because you don't want to, LLMs should not be like Jeopardy contestants where you stuff everything in their brains and expect them to memorize everything. That's unintelligent. Intelligent is knowing how, when, and where to look for information you weren't trained on through search and retrieval. And then cite where it's from and give credit or monetize in different ways. But I think it's an interesting perspective, whoever it was over here who mentioned that. You have the data, you have the know-how, and by the way, let's be clear, a lot of this is not sucking up data. It's synthetic data, creating data from experience of annotators that would be in your organizations oftentimes.
So it's a great idea. We took that down. We're going to work on that.
Yeah.
You can have 6 lawyers in the room, though. That's the only thing.
That's up to you guys, not
Speaking to the earlier thing that you said, I said that OpenAI had $5 billion in revenue. You said that's small. That's right. Google had 180 billion revenue, so total 185 billion. The majority of it free searches, as you said, people search for free. But look at Spotify, 16 billion in revenue. They have 600 million users, but 50 million paid and 550 million just take the ads. But the 50 million who pay are the majority of the revenue. So I think that search is going to shift. I think that 180 million is going to get eaten away, and people will move. I don't know if they'll pay 70 a month, 50 a month, 20 a month, even 10 a month. It might be in your phone bill, it might be in your Samsung subscription, it might be in your AirPods subscription. But I think people are going to shift and say, hey, I want to stop searching and getting all those links and just get me the answer I want. I'm willing to have it answered from premium content, and I'm willing to have it go back to the creator of it. Obviously, I have a vested interest in that happening because I really want to see the world change in that direction, but I think we can make that happen with quality.
All right, that is the perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for being here with us.